Hello, everybody, wherever they are in the world. Welcome to everybody. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar. It's an exciting webinar. I'm really excited to hear from the panelists. My name is Charles Brigham. I work at Esri. I'm on the nonprofit and global organizations team. And I'm really happy to have the opportunity to host this session. Esri, if you may not know, is the leading geospatial provider in the world. And we're here to showcase some of the great work that our users are doing around the world. Today's webinar is titled The Federated System for the SDGs, Processing Location Intelligence Data. And this is presented by our presenters who I will just talk to you about who they are in just a moment. Our presenters today, to kick it off, we have Luis Gonzalez Morales from the United Nations Statistics Division. We have Lorraine McNerney from Ireland. We have Greg Scott from UNSD. And without further ado, we will turn it over to Luis Gonzalez Morales to begin the session. He's going to talk about the great work that's going on in the UN Statistics Division. And what we have on the current slide is more explicit roles and titles of our excellent speakers this morning. So please, Luis, if you don't mind.
Thank you, Charles. Very happy to be here and to join my colleagues Lorraine and Greg to share what we have been doing together and also with you in partnership with Esri. It's really a very exciting project we've been working on over more than 1 year now. So what I would like to start with is with a brief introduction, a bit of the context, what we are talking about. I'm not sure if everybody in the audience will be deeply involved into what the SDGs are, and so just a few words about that. The 2030 agenda is the result of a process where member states, United Nations member states, came together in 2015 with a declaration of a vision and shared principles for sustainable development, principles for people, planet, prosperity, peace, partnership, setting goals that we want to achieve together with in the next 50 years. So this agenda, this declaration, was also supported, is supported by a results framework, specific goals and targets that would help us follow up and review progress, identify gaps, identify challenges where we need to do more, where we are having success. And on top of that, the international community also decided to put in place an indicator framework, so that this should be really an agenda whose implementation is data-driven, where evidence should be providing one of the means to achieve these aspirational and very important goals. So what I will talk about more, and what this session is more about, is about this follow-up and review process, this data reporting, and how data can support that, and what we as a world community are doing to make sure that the data is available, is accessible, and is used to drive these goals. So this agenda is based on, and the follow-on review process is based on a multi-level data reporting. And what I mean with that is there is data that needs to be made available at the national and subnational level, and then at the global level, building on that national reporting, building on data from national sources, there's strategic guidance and follow-up to be done at the global level. So it's really a multi-tier process, starting from local to national to global data sharing, reporting, and using those informations, that information where it is needed, when it is needed. So I come from the statistics division, as Charles mentioned. We are in the United Nations the Secretariat of the Statistical Commission. This commission is the apex entity that provides some guidance, standards, and helps facilitate that national statistical systems are able to come up with the evidence for policy making for implementing this agenda. So this statistical commission meets every year, and this year there was a clear sort of endorsement of the need for establishing a system of federated national and global data hubs for the SDGs with very specific objectives: to facilitate integration of different data sources, to promote data interoperability, and to foster collaboration. Is very important among the different partners from different stakeholder groups, including the geospatial community and other data providers, to improve the data flows and support this global reporting I was talking about. So what is the idea behind this federated system? It's a country-led system of systems implemented through open standards, through principles for data interoperability, making use to the fullest extent of GIS capabilities, of data analytic capabilities, also leveraging opportunities for web collaboration, for communication, and engaging with users so that the data is actionable and has impact. So this system architecture is the vision of it is to support national statistical offices to manage all this wealth of information, statistical, geospatial, integrating also additional new sources of information with traditional ones, and as I was saying before, enabling that decision makers access this information at the local and national level where it is needed, and so empowering countries to contribute to the global reporting. So this is also supported by a governance model based on the principle of national ownership. So I was mentioning before, the main level of reporting, the focus should be at the country level and at the subnational level. So it's really very important to maintain the national ownership of this architecture, where national statistical systems are the ones that coordinate the implementation of policies, of standards around the production of data and around the dissemination of data for the 2030 agenda. So this architecture implies logical data models that provide consistency across these different levels, across different organizations, common data models, common data definitions, agreements on data flows that allow for interoperability and for collaboration and exchange of data. Every hub, every component of this system needs to have the necessary autonomy to publish and to share authoritative data that is contributing to the global catalog of SDG data and information. And users should be able to access this data, making sure that it is clear what is the origin. The traceability and accountability of the origin of data sources is also a key aspect of this. So I think enough for an introduction of the concept of the federated information system. In this session, I will share with you what we have been doing in implementing this vision at the UN level, so at the global level. Later on, Lorraine will talk about an example of how is this implemented at the country level. and Greg will provide some vision of what comes next. So let me just start very quickly with what we are doing at the global level to implement this vision, and I will jump into a live demo of the UN Open SDG Data Hub as it is right now. So this is our Open SDG Data Hub. It is public. It's you can visit and explore it. I will give you a very quick tour of how the front end looks, what users can expect to find here at the moment, and what are the plans to grow it in the future. So this is a place where we share data, so it is easily usable to work on analyzing the data that's available and communicating this data. So I will go in a moment into the inners of what we can find for each of the different goals. Just want to show you also that this is a place where we start linking the global level with the national level, linking to national hubs, to national data platforms, so that this vision of interconnected hubs becomes reality. Also, this is a place where we provide additional resources for specialized kinds of users, how to access the data, say, for those developers that are interested in consuming the data for producing applications, and also data communication products, so oriented to policymakers or to more specialized kind of audiences, how data can be interpreted, how data can be presented in a more engaging way, and initiatives that are around this data. So I have some limited time, so let me just jump right into what we can now see in this infrastructure. So we are putting together the data sets that the United Nations Statistics Division is custodian of, this global SDG indicators database. It's now made available through this platform. Different indicators as different special data sets ready to be consumed, ready to be used by users. But here comes the most important thing, in my view, is that this is also a place where the different member states are starting to be to make their data visible, to make their data exposed in the context of the global indicators. So you see that we have global indicators plus indicators, like in this case, shared by the by Ireland, by the National Statistical System of Ireland. What we can see here, and I would invite you to explore this by yourselves. Many of you are acquainted already with this kind of platform. Is the data ready to be used to produce maps, to produce data stories. So I will not go into the details of the thousands of things that you can do with this data. I think maybe my colleagues from Esri or Ireland would be more in a better position to explain all the possibilities that you can do with the data. But my message here is that this is working. The concept has been proved, and data is now being integrated from the national and the global levels. So what I wanted to share more in detail, rather than going into what you can do with the data, is how this works on the back end. So, and this is the point of collaboration. We have in this architecture the possibility of collaborating with different organizations. What you see here on your screen is the UN DESA organization, where we organize, manage our datasets, the datasets that we curate, that we are custodians of. But then we also set up groups, and these groups are the places where we meet with other partners, with partners that then start sharing their data sets with us so that we can expose them together in a coherent manner. So let me just show you what is behind the SDG 1 group that we have in our organization. This is the placeholder where we put together all the information on goal 1 that we want to disseminate, but our partners, like in this case Ireland, is also a member of this group and shares this data. This data is sitting not with us, it's sitting in the infrastructure of the country that originates it. And so they are free to either push data here or revoke the access if they decide to do so. So it's full national ownership. It's just the framework that allows us to integrate different sources. One thing I could also, you can see here, you have data from UNDASA and you have data from Ireland. You can filter out if you are only interested in the data from a specific country. We are working very closely with a number of countries right now, and we expect more countries to join this initiative in the coming months, so that this will start growing organically, so users can find the data that they need and with the context that they need. I don't know how are we with time, because I would just go back very quickly to my presentation to show you. Oops. What I was talking about, sharing data flows, sharing data management practices, and so this is our implementation. How we do it in our organization. We have data coming from our SDG database, plus geographic areas, the geometry that then we integrate with statistical data, and through different scripts that we have publicly available, we push those data into this ArcGIS Online platform. So the idea is that other countries can replicate this flow or similar flows, or decide to do completely different things. But that by the fact that we are able to share how we do this data management, this data processing with each other, then we help member states and each other build the capacity needed to deliver the data that we are asked to deliver. In these open repositories, you can find exactly how we do it. This is what I wanted to share, is that this is an open project that benefits from the inputs, from the feedback, from users, from partners, from data providers, and so on. So with that, I would like to finish and pass it over to Charles. Thanks.
Thanks, Luis. That was extremely compelling piece of work. I think a lot of people will be excited to hear about more about how they can engage in that. And just again, to everybody, we'll be sharing this out to you all as we move along. I think right now is a perfect time to turn it over to Lorraine McNerney, and she's the General Manager for Geospatial Systems Ireland. And this is a really good opportunity, pretty much for the first time, to see the synthesis from the global to the national. And it's kind of a perfect sequence as we go from global to national, and then the vision side, which Greg Scott will present. And that flow of information, global to local reporting, is key to achieve a 2030 agenda, which Lorraine has been pioneering in Ireland with the rest of her colleagues. So I'm going to turn over to Lorraine now.
Okay. Thank you, Charles, and good afternoon from Dublin, everybody. I'd really like to thank you for the opportunity to share Ireland's involvement in this SDG initiative, and just to make the point that, as you've rightly already identified, Charles, this is very much a collaborative project in Ireland between our National Statistics Office, Ordnance Survey Ireland, which is my own organisation, the National Mapping Agency, but also our local Esri partner, Esri Ireland. So the story of Ireland is very much a collaborative one to start with. So just another point, as you've said there, you've showcased Ireland and our data from the UN Data Hub. So the slides and the content that I have is really much showcasing the country-owned element of Ireland's SDG implementation and how we're leading it at a national level. So just very briefly, the two national organisations that I've mentioned, my own company, Ordnance Survey Ireland, is the National Mapping Agency, and we've been established since 1824, and we very much have a mandate to provide national mapping services and data services, and any of the content that we provide is collated and managed at a national level. And likewise with our partners in the Central Statistics Office, the CSO, they're a national organisation around since 1949, and they also have a mandate from government to collect, compile, extract and disseminate statistical information for the state. So just a little over a year ago, both our organisations formally signed a Memorandum of Understanding, or an MOU, and one of the key initiatives that we sought to undertake and become more involved with is the implementation of the SDGs for Ireland. So really our story is around that. But first, just to take a quick look back at, I suppose, some of the commonalities in our organisations. So key to that is location, and location being the common framework. So from a national mapping agency, boundaries are a key element of what we do and the data that we collate and provide. And the statistical information, combining population, census information, lots of other national statistics data, we have a lot of information that we would have common IDs and common boundaries that allow us to collate this information. And some of the initiatives that we've been involved in, aside from the SDGs, has been around, for example, linked open data. So there was an initiative in Ireland where we took a number of common national data sets at boundary level and created those as 5-star linked open data. And we're very proud of the fact actually that Ireland achieved #1 place in the Open Data Maturity Index last year, and our work jointly with the CSO helped Ireland achieve that accolade. A second project that we were involved with last year, and again using the Esri technology and platform, was around the dissemination of our census information. So in 2016, the Central Statistics Office did a full national census. So using the platform we had been building out for the SDG initiative, we were able to, within a couple of days, stand up an open data portal to disseminate over 500 layers of geostatistical information. So really just making the point that we're trying to grow this idea of the country-owned and country-led collaboration between statistical and geospatial information. So then the third key initiative that we've been working on over the last year is as part of establishing Ireland's United Nations SDGs Data Hub. And Ireland were part of the initial research project, which was undertaken by the UNSD and Esri. And we're just a little over a year, as Louise has already mentioned there. This project commenced back in May 2017. So Ireland participated along with Mexico, Senegal, the Philippines, Qatar, South Africa and Australia. And really the key approach, or the key goal of the research initiative, was to look at a new approach for monitoring and implementing the UN SDGs, but really using geospatial and GIS as the foundation layer. So the technical architecture that we've stood up as part of the initiative is based on the ArcGIS Open Data and Hub technologies. So this slide here just shows the various layers that we've implemented, right, really starting from the bottom up. We've taken data sources from the Central Statistics Office and from Ordnance Survey Ireland as the authoritative national data. And then we've combined that with other third-party statistical and spatial information. So we've been collating and collaborating with other national organisations to really, I suppose, source the information that we can for delivering on the indicators for the SDGs. So the data itself is processed and managed using ArcGIS Pro, and we develop the measures from those various data sources. And the indicators themselves are then published as feature services using a dedicated AGOL account and then up into the ArcGIS Hub, where they're rendered either as web maps, story maps, or we've other applications of their use. So just taking a brief walk through the site itself, these are just screenshots of the site that we have, but it is obviously live and is also available through the UN Data Hub. So this was the homepage that we had on launch, which was in November of last year. And it was really just at a starting point to set out the goals from an Irish context. And as I've mentioned, the platform was developed in partnership between the three organisations, OSI, CSO, and with our Esri Ireland partners locally here. And that was reusing some of the Esri architecture that Ordnance Survey Ireland already had in place, which we referred to as GeoHive, and that's a collaborative platform that we were using at a government and a national level for business, citizens, and for government. So in the last couple of weeks, we've recently updated our homepage to bring it more in line with some recent initiatives since we launched the platform itself at the end of last year. So there's a department within government who are responsible for the policy element of the SDGs here in Ireland, and they've recently published their framework document setting out the vision, the various steps and stages, along with the key stakeholders and responsible data owners. So we really updated the look and feel of the site, and we plan to add more information and links to other policy documentation in the coming weeks. So similar to what Louise has taken you through already, we have the key elements of exploring the data through the 17 goals. And at this stage, we now have data indicators and information for each of the 17 goals. And our plan is to populate those and also put time series information as we move forward in the initiative. You can also then view the data, taking this example here under Goal 5, Gender Equality. You can look at the data itself, download it in your preferred, for example, shapefile or different formats to suit your own need. And then there's also the API Explorer version of that, where end users can go in and access the REST API documentation, query the URLs, download various objects and information. So for the first time, this platform has allowed us to combine this geostatistical information, but not just as a map or as statistical methods, but it allows us to have it in different data formats with different API endpoints and really consume and use the data in a way and in a manner that hadn't been available to users before. And also one of the key initiatives, and I think really one of the points of the project that has caused discussion or allowed for discussion and I suppose further involvement of other organisations in Ireland is around the use of story maps using standard out-of-the-box Esri templates. So on the site, we have 3 story maps that we've developed in conjunction with other organisations. And you can see here they're around changing patterns of unemployment. One is around life on land and information and statistics on that. And the third of those being the status of Ireland's rivers. So just taking you through some of the points of one of those, the first story map, Ireland's life on land, you can go in and look at, for example, in this case, habitat types across Ireland and looking at, taking the example here, protected areas. So Ireland has a particular, I suppose, concentration of protected areas on the west coast of the country. So this allows for data and decision makers to go in and look at evidence-based decision making for government to see where funding or investment should be targeted. And again, our plan will be to increase the number of story maps and stories and information points that they're telling. Another story map that we've put together is around the changing patterns of unemployment and poverty in Ireland over a period 2011 to 2017. And again, this story map illustrates a different narrative on data that was already there and available as open data. And just taking one example here, this shows the changing patterns of unemployment focusing in on Dublin city itself. So you can look at Dublin in a closer manner, looking at the various unemployment rates within specific areas. You can click on the data, you can analyse it, and you can really delve into the detail interactively through the story maps themselves. So in terms of progress to date in Ireland, as I've mentioned, the UN SDG Data Hub for Ireland was launched at the end of last year, November last year, and it's where we're saying interested parties can really openly access, visualize and download the data and related APIs. And to date, we've developed 59 indicators and 114 data sets at various geographies. So that's from the high level, so at NUTS geographies, but right down to small area levels. So that will be a population or a density of between 90 to 100 households. And we've also, since the launch, substantially increased the data now available through time series. So where we had indicators and we had data going back over a number of time series or periods, we've added that to add value to the data that's there and allow a greater, in terms of analysis, a greater degree of analysis on the data that we've made available. And much of our work over the last couple of months has been around data governance and the establishment of a data governance team. So we now have a number of key stakeholders across public service bodies in Ireland and key government stakeholders. And our intention there will be that all of the indicators will be populated with authoritative national data, and that we would have stakeholders being responsible and being the authoritative source of that data, feeding them into a workflow and into an automated process where possible. And finally, on this slide then, we've been working closely with our Department of Foreign Affairs, who are participating in the UN's high-level political forum next month in July in New York. And the site, as I've talked you through here today, will be showcased as part of that, and the Irish government will be demonstrating that they've now adopted the outputs of our work with the UN and Esri research initiative over the last year, and making that the official data hub for Ireland for our reporting of the SDGs. And it's also their intention to create a story map showing the developments that we've undertaken and actually showcasing Ireland's national report for the delivery of the SDGs. And finally then, I've mentioned the more recent developments have been around data governance. So one of the key focus areas at the moment is aligning the existing processes in place from the National Statistics Office in line with processes that the National Mapping Agency, Ordnance Survey Ireland, are developing around geospatial data management practices and processes. So our intention here is to ensure that standard processes that are already embedded within our organizations are complementary, and that we have very tight data governance practices around metadata, data quality, data security, documents and controls, and really ensuring that the Sustainable Development Goals for Ireland will be embedded and sustainable into the future. And last point here on this slide is that we also plan, as part of our next steps, will be to look at how we can further disseminate the data that we've managed to collate and showcase on the site itself through either a series of dashboards, other story maps, or we're working with Esri to see how some of their tools, such as Insights and other applications, can showcase Ireland's national data hub for the SDGs. So thank you for your time and for the opportunity to share Ireland's involvement in this project today.
Thank you, Lorraine. That was excellent. I really appreciated the detail you went into in terms of how you're going about this. There's a number of questions that I have, and I think I'm going to be patient and hold off. But thanks very much for that. And again, everybody, if you do have questions, please put them in the questions box, and we'll tackle those at the end if you want to ask specific presenters or the group. Right now, we have the opportunity, the great opportunity, to talk to Greg Scott, Interregional Advisor for UNGGIM, and I think he's here with me now. So I'm going to pose the question to him. You know, in terms of global reporting, you've been in the geospatial space for a very, very long time. How have you seen this work changing the global reporting mechanism as a whole, and how do you see this specific project around SDG data hubs, you know, from its inception to expanding and the vision of that? What does that look like to you? We'd really like a good sense of that, Greg.
Yeah, look, thanks, Charles. Hello, everyone. It's great to have the opportunity to not only be part of this great panel today, but also to tell a bit of a story and a journey that we've been on over the last year or so. By way of background, I'm also in UN Statistics Division along with Lewis. I come from the geography side of the house. I'm a geographer, and between statistics and geospatial and geography, obviously within the UN system and the SDGs, these data elements play a very pivotal role in the development agenda. Just before as I move into answering your question, Charles, I just want to, I guess, reflect on a couple of things around the 2030 agenda, and also what Lewis and Lorraine referred to in terms of their presentations and the content, and just remind ourselves as to a degree why we're doing what we're doing. One of the things about the 2030 agenda, as Lewis mentioned at the start, was this need for a much greater data-driven approach about using data for the evidence base and how we measure and monitor. And at the same time, this realization that not only do we need to look at more sources of data, but new and innovative ways of doing that. And it's a bit of a paradigm shift to the Millennium Development Goals, where the need for sources of data are becoming more critical, particularly at the subnational level. So that's really important to think about. And also at the subnational, the idea about disaggregated data and data that's disaggregated by geographic location. And in the 2030 agenda, the actual outcome document itself refers to the explicit need to exploit the use of new and emerging technologies, including geospatial information, Earth observations, and other sources of data, and in ways that they can be integrated more with statistics and demographics and other types of data. So that's incredibly important. The other aspect too, which as Lewis mentioned and also Charles, is this idea of the 2030 agenda being a global policy outcome. The SDGs at a global level are signed off by all member states, but implementation is very local. At the end of the day, we need to see tangible change and progress and evidence at the ground level. And many of us in the geospatial world are very familiar with the idea about how we can take data from local to global and from global to local. And the context behind this initiative was exactly that. How do we think about our global reporting, but not missing out on how we do that at a national and local level? And so a key part of this journey a year ago, as we started getting into the second year of I guess the 2030 agenda, and we saw just the struggle that countries were having in terms of just starting to bring data together to report on the SDGs. And that was a challenge for developed countries, and even a greater challenge even today for the developing countries. So for us, the concept was, how do we leverage data? How do we make it more interoperable, more available, accessible, but do that with enabling technologies that we have now, being able to use web-based services, being able to use new applications and technologies to enable the release of data, to enable the harnessing, the analytics, the harmonization of data, both at a national level and also at a global level. So that was sort of the idea around not only a federated system of systems, but actually a federated data ecosystem, thinking about how we can make our data more interconnected as we move forward in this 2030 agenda. So to this vision, we saw by the examples from Lewis and Lorraine that the technology enables us to do what we need to do. We can see that technology is not the impediment here. We know this works. This idea of data hubs, federated system of systems, interoperability, standards-based works. The question then is around how do we maintain and sustain that and bring countries together. So we have different elements on thinking about how when we've talked about scaling this, but in essence, we're only starting to touch the tip of the iceberg, and I mean that in a number of elements. First of all, as Lorraine mentioned, with Ireland, is first of all just the data that's required to serve indicators. And Lorraine mentioned that they now have 59 indicators in their SDG hub for Ireland, and in those 59 indicators are 114 data sets. And I would suggest that Ireland is one of the most developed in this space at the moment. But that's 59 indicators of 232. And no, every country does not have to report on all indicators. But I think the breadth and the depth of the type of data needs, the indicators, particularly when we think about developing countries more, is not only where do I get my data from, how do I condition it, how do I bring it available and able to be sustained, is going to be an important criteria. And I think we're only now just starting down that journey in terms of the indicators themselves. The other is then in how we actually bring the baseline to developing countries. We've started initially with 6 countries in our original pilot. We've now brought that out to 15. But how do we do that, say, for 60 or 70 or 80? How do we scale? How do we scale Africa or areas in Asia Pacific or the Caribbean and all these different countries that have need, but it's around capability and capacity in terms of some of these aspects. And one of the things that we found very quickly in this initial process with the research exercise, when we brought the original 6 countries together, was this aha moment around, wow, we have the technology, we can do that, but we need to condition our data. We need to a degree, take our data that might be sitting in spreadsheets and Excel and different tabular formats and geocode it or geo-enable it or locate it. Initially at a national level, but as we get down into subnational, what does that mean? And so those elements are also a key part of how we go about this. So scaling is one of the big things that we're thinking about at the moment. The vision around where we need to go, and just to give a reference frame to that, in 3 months' time, in September, we are 20% into the 2030 agenda to 2030. We're 20% through, and next year we'll be quarter of the way through. Time is not on our side. So it's going to be very important, and we've seen this thus far, that we work better and leverage more with our community, with our member states, with industry, with the private sector, and with others, including academia. And that's certainly an approach we in the UN system seen as being important. For us to scale is going to take motivation, is going to take resources. We know that, and at the end of the day, it's going to take funding to do that, and we're very cognizant of that, and we're looking at those aspects at the moment. What we are seeing is an appetite of a realization. It's kind of interesting, Charles, is that you don't really know how you answer the problem until you see something in front of you. And through this process, and particularly the story maps, people now get a much better understanding about what we mean when we talk about integrating geospatial and statistics and environment and health and poverty and other data. They can start seeing the relationships, they can start seeing how they frame and reference their questions and their answers with data more holistically and in an integrated way. But we're only really part of the way there. We keep saying if we were able to establish something like Ireland has got in half a dozen countries in Africa, we know then that we've actually got a model that's workable. And the model is workable. The key challenge for us at the moment is getting capacity development, data development, abilities for people and national statistical officers in the developing countries and the geospatial agencies having the capabilities to bring their reporting from something that might be sitting in a table or even a piece of paper to bear into the global reporting process. And we're starting to see through this pilot process, this research exercise, a much, much greater understanding of that. And by way of example of that, when the state of Palestine came into the research exercise, we had a high-level forum in Mexico City last November, and in 3 days they initiated a data hub by being able to consume their data out of their system. We know it's doable, but it's the capacity building that's going to be important. The vision is that in the next few years, we can scale this up considerably. The ideal will be, and if we're being realistic about this, is that perhaps in another 5 years or so, we have local to global reporting that has been mainstreamed into the 2030 agenda, and then mainstreamed into our world going forward. It's very aspirational. The technology barriers are not there. It's going to be the will and the ability for us to bring this to bear for those that are actually at the moment the ones being left behind the most. But we're very, particularly in the UN system and in UNSD, where we are confident about this because we need to be, and because we know that it has the ability to make a significant difference at a national level, but also in the way that we bring data at the global level. So I might leave it at that for the moment, but certainly happy to expand if necessary.
Thanks, Greg. That was great. It actually answered some of my questions that I had for myself. I definitely enjoyed hearing about some of the bigger challenges around this and how we as a community can come together to kind of think about that. I'd pose that to everyone, and it stems into other questions at the local level, pointed towards Lorraine's work in Ireland. But we do have my colleague from the Nonprofit Global Organizations team, Adam Pfister, who will be joining us now to talk about ArcGIS Hub. I'm going to turn it over to him to share some of the capabilities that have allowed us to get this far. And you're only going to see a snapshot of those. A lot of the fundamental work you've seen through Ireland, through Lorraine's presentations, through Luis's presentations, and outlined in Greg's discussion. So we're going to pull back a bit, and Adam will talk to what we've been working on moving forward in this work, as well as provide some context about where we've been as Esri to support the SDGs in a more broader capabilities, user community oriented way. Adam?
Great, thank you, Charles. And thank you to Lorraine and Greg. It's an honor, and Luis, to be in the same panel and talk about some of the same challenges. Like Charles mentioned, I'm going to dive a little bit more into the technical details around how we might get to some of that capacity building that Greg was mentioning and emphasizing, and how we can enable some of the lesser developed countries to get up and running very quickly using the great examples from Lorraine and Luis, what they've put together already. And so specifically, I'd like to talk about the technology behind what some of the elements that they were showing. And that is essentially ArcGIS Hub. ArcGIS Hub was renamed from Open Data. So I think maybe it's good to kind of set a context around the two terms. Open Data did not go away. It is within ArcGIS. It's something you simply just click a box to enable. It's not going anywhere. It's just being simply brought into this larger idea of a hub. And the hub is where things come together. You engage around community, You rally around events, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a bit. But really, open data is the ability to share data sets by using groups. You put data sets into a group that you want to be open. You have complete control over that. And then any changes to those data sets will automatically be reflected in your open data site. And the open data site allows you to search through all the data sets using keywords, tags, and location. So what consists of an open data site and pages? Well, these are the key elements. The team has developed a very easy to use drag and drop interface to build the layout of your site and page. And on the left-hand side there, you can see these elements are called cards. So I can insert rows, and in those rows, I can split that in half and have one side be a text, the other side be a chart. And then maybe below that, I drop in a map, or I drop in a summary statistic. So the end result will be the user seeing those sites, and it's essentially a data-driven site that you dragged and dropped and is pulling directly from those open data sets. And going as a kind of an evolution of open data, we saw that people wanted to do more. So on their own, they were creating what they termed initiatives. And they wanted to take their data, their pages and sites, and kind of group them into a goal. And that's where the idea of initiative came about. We wanted people to get engaged. And very simply, initiatives are measurable goals. It includes a strategy to improve a particular need around a community, or in our case, maybe around the Sustainable Development Goals. So below there, in the initiatives box, create more affordable housing, make parking easier, encourage startups, reduce traffic congestion, using less energy. These are all very relatable to the goals, but they're actually acting at that local level, which is where we want to see action happening to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. And they're a repeatable framework. So initiatives can be shared by companies or by private sectors such as Esri, or it can be shared and created with and by international agencies or in partnership with local governments. And they can put them out there for other people to join. So other governments can join an initiative, other agencies can join these initiatives and simply be a part of that and report back based progress around that initiative. An initiative templates consist of really the elements that we were just looking at around sites. So charts and maps, story maps, authoritative data, surveys and polls, dashboards can all be embedded within a template. So I'll show you an example of this right now about how, rather than building a site from scratch, I'm simply going to join an initiative and I'm going to get all of that content without having to configure it myself. And I'll show you an example around SDG 1, no poverty. So now I'm viewing the hub page around, and I'm looking at the initiative gallery. So at the moment, these are just some initiatives that Esri has shared around different topics, addressing the opioid epidemic, preventing vector-borne disease, reducing homelessness. And I see this one around SDG 1, no poverty. I can get some information about why this initiative is important. I can even preview that initiative. And when I'm previewing it, I can see the goals, the different steps that are involved. This first step is engaging the public. And here are these different templates around engaging the public. And in this case, it's a website, it's a pre-built web page. The next step is around listening to the community. So I have a pre-built survey that I could fire up. I also have a dashboard to help me monitor progress. And I'm going to switch over and show you this initiative that I've already joined. And I'm going to take the example of Senegal as far as how I might get up and running as that country or as a ministry involved with this no poverty goal. So I can see I've got a website here. I didn't have to do anything other than join the initiative. And when I did, I got this website for free. I didn't have to go in and drop in the mission statements or find the targets. This was all configured for me. At the same time, I can go and edit that site, and I can maybe change the background, change the particular targets that I want to focus on, really make this my own as my local government or my local agency. But the real power comes in when it's more than just a website. We want to map in data sets. Greg made a great point about how we build capacity, get people up and running. How do we bring in data right away without going through a very long and lengthy process? So to do that, I want to use this target page. I want to use my own data set. So in order to create this page, I'm going to need to provide my own poverty data by some kind of geographic area. So it's as simple as walking through this process. I select my data set. I can search through data in my own organization. I can search through the entirety of ArcGIS Online. And I happen to know that Senegal has an ArcGIS Online site, and they even have data for poverty as well as some other goals. So I'll take the poverty by region data set that Senegal has published, and I'll search for that. And I can see there it is. And it has one layer, poverty by region. So I'll select that layer. Now I need to map my attributes. So if I want to do something with this data, it is requiring some kind of area name. And I've got a region name field. And now, of course, I need data related to poverty. So I'll look through my fields, and there is a data from 2015, and I'll save and close. Now that has just mapped my data set to what this page needs to be configured. So configuring that page will take a copy of that, take the data mapping I did, share it to the initiative, and once it's finished here, we'll be able to see that page with our own data set. And this is, you can imagine this is pretty powerful, right? I only required or mapped one data set, but I could have 20 data sets in here. Maybe only 5 are optional, or 10 are optional. So this is done. I'll take a look at it now. Again, it's a page that I didn't have to create. I just simply joined the initiative, but it's now pulling a summary statistic from my data. So I can see the targets and indicators there. And if I go back, I can see this is another indicator page that's also ready to go. All it required was that same poverty by area data set. And this one has a chart in it. It has a couple more elements to the page itself, but all this is being done for me in the background. So as we take a look at that, we've walked down the line from SDG 1 as a website to 1.2, I believe, to indicator 1.2.2. And now I can see my regions in a poverty by area chart. And then I can also have that information displayed for me on a map here, right in the site. And of course, there are other elements you could add, like story maps, pre-configured story maps, maybe with 5 sections that you could go in and then edit after the fact. You have a survey that will open up in Survey 123 that you could configure, as well as a dashboard that will bring in those elements. And I'll open the dashboard as well. It's going to take that poverty rate data for me. This is a very, very simple example, but you could get very complex as far as what the different widgets would do, the different elements on the map itself, and what would show in different areas. So that was an example of initiatives, and we're currently working on a conceptual example, another version of this around no poverty. And we love to share that with the community, get people's reactions to it, see what would be valuable, and have somebody ultimately take ownership of initiatives like this, launch their own, and activate local communities around these different goals. And with that, I'll hand it back over to Charles.
So I want to take an opportunity here to while everyone's on the call to ask a few questions that I think would resonate with a number of people listening in. And maybe this first question is more geared towards Lorraine in Ireland, because at the root of a lot of this work is that local action. And I see what Ireland's doing as a piece of that certainly at the local level. And I guess the question would be, and it's not, you know, it's not endemic to Lorraine, but she would likely be the best to tackle it initially, is what would spur the most action at the local level? You know, in for instance, Ireland, how do we as a community help to orient or inhibit action at the local level? This is the question I had. Lorraine, if you don't mind, would you mind giving us some thoughts on that?
Yes, sure, and thank you, Charles. I think one of the most interesting elements of being part of the research project and trying to encourage and entice people to share their data and put a narrative around it has been through the use of the story map. So as I've mentioned, we had been using Esri's technology platform, and we launched a local collaborative platform at the end of 2015. And certainly the story maps, again, at that point in time, gave you the ability to take data that's already, you know, in many cases there. It's available as open data. It's available for free download and access. But what we found was combining the geospatial information that was available along with the statistical information and putting a narrative on that. So telling a story around it, telling, you know, where there was either a policy issue and explaining it through interactive mapping or graphs and charts. I think that's been one of the key enablers for us to get more engagement at a local level here. So playing that out, I mentioned we had set up the formal data governance groups, and that put, I suppose, clear responsibility on data owners in the state, you know, saying that they're responsible for supplying the SDGs. But we're also asking them to engage in, you know, what is the narrative or what is the story, or you know, from a political angle, is there something that's topical at the moment that we could create a story map specific to their domain? So as my colleagues from the Central Statistics Office here is, we're just talking to the data. So the data is being provided by others. We're not commenting on government policy or issues. We're just helping them to share the narrative or the story on that. So I think that's been one of the key engagement pieces that we've found was of benefit. I think the simplicity as well of the goals and how they're set out allows you to also get departments or agencies that view their data in a different way. They may have just seen, so poverty information is collected by many organisations here in Ireland, but pulling them together and having them shared and available under a single goal then allows, you know, pulling that data together allows more evidence-based decision making. And what we've also seen here at a local level is, for example, the IDA, which is the really Inward Investment Development Association. So they're looking to get foreign direct investment into Ireland. So they're now using the site, its content, and they're creating their own story map as a result. So we also have evidence of, not just at a government level, but also other either private sector or other organisations who are now going to Ireland's National SDG Data Hub as an authoritative source of data. So our intentions over the next year, as we move into year 2 of this initiative, will be around that stakeholder engagement piece. And Adam's slides there around the initiatives we see will be the next key step for us. So getting the civil society engagement, and there's already been interest shown in that. So yeah, I think in summary, the story maps and the ability through some of the technology shown on the webinar here today will be the next phase for us in getting more buy-in and engagement with the SDGs.
Thanks, Lorraine. Any comments?
I just adding to exactly what Lorraine's saying, Charles, is that in fact what it does is just brings common insight and understanding to the problems and the situations, and this commonality and understanding is I think sometimes we forget about that. We only know what we know and we interpret what we interpret. But if we've got a common frame to get that insight and understanding, makes a big difference, particularly when you're trying to bring that understanding to a decision maker level who don't necessarily know the nuances of the detail, but have significant problems they want to answer, and this is answering those problems in that narrative.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I think as Esri, we're really involved in the stakeholder engagement piece of this, and we're looking to UN Statistics Division and folks like the government Ireland, like Lorraine, to help us illustrate that better in our capabilities in our community. I think those are really good comments from you guys. Thank you for that. I wanna just address a few questions. There's a question on let's say, take a few here. There's one on patients' data protection in healthcare and sensitive information of patients. I'm just going to address that quickly by saying that the personal information of patients is something that really needs to be considered and addressed carefully, regardless of any software use. So that would come with any software, in whatever the case may be. And there's a few elements to that with regard to Esri for privacy and security around, say, GDPR. And we have some public information on that on our website around the administration component of the platform and our commitment to GDPR privacy and security. So I would go there to address that question in greater detail in terms of our technology, but I'm sure that other technologies and capabilities of other platforms can also support that security. Taking another question on whether the templates are enabled now. That's a good question. Thank you for asking that. Right now, the SDG templates are not available. We're now working with the member states, the UN, and partners actually on trying to make those available in a scalable fashion. We have a number of them that were mentioned previously in terms of what people can use, but trying to mainstream that is not an easy task, and we're embarking on that now. I guess, and that will extend beyond Esri, right? And maybe if you don't mind, Luis or Greg, if you could comment about the larger partnership, because as Esri, we're doing a lot of work with the development organizations and member states, but I want to also kind of have you guys kind of share the broader partnership vision of what we've developed, maybe mentioning some of the other partners, so it's clear to everyone that we're trying to be inclusive and expand, the talent pool in what we're trying to achieve.
So let me give it a first shot at this. As Greg was mentioning in his initial comments, the technology we have seen is not an issue. The question we face now is how we scale and how we bring all these capabilities that the current technology allows to member states, to local governments, to communities. And for that, we definitely need to work together with different partners, with the technology providers, with donors, with communities of users and communities of developers, so that all they fit in this data ecosystem that is consisting of many different parts. We need a lot of capability on the ground. We need basic statistical work to condition the data so that it can feed into this kind of platforms. And then we need to build capacity also to analyze the data, to communicate the resources of this analysis in ways that are understandable, that policymakers can make use of directly. And for that, we need to work very quickly in establishing partnerships, finding mechanisms to mobilize resources, and to make sure that the very limited resources that we have are invested where they have impact. Yeah, I would stop there.
That was great. I think it got at some of the thoughts that I had around some of the work that we're doing to bring in other partners. And I want to be very clear, and as Esri, this is not just us in this effort. You know, there's other technology partners, there's other foundations, there's other organizations, and we want this to be inclusive of all the talents that are going to be required to reach the 2030 agenda in a strong way. So I'm excited about how this is going to progress over time. I do have, if we can just step back a moment, I would enjoy hearing more about how this is changing the way indicator reporting is done within the development sphere. So more specifically, how is this changed, you know, in terms of national ownership of information? What are the collaborative elements do you see happening here to help us in terms of reporting and monitoring on SDGs? Maybe one of you, maybe Greg, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
On the spot.
Thanks,
Lorraine.
Charles. And certainly Lorraine hinted on this very strongly when she talked about the work that's been happening in Ireland, and the fact that this now becomes part of the official reporting into the national SDG reporting. Certainly just 2 years ago, those that may be familiar, UNSD is required to put out the annual report on the SDGs, and that report forms two documents. One is an official document that goes to the high-level political forum each year, so it's an official UN document that reports on progress. It's an overview report, and as a compendium to that, a partner to that is a glossy report, which is the SDG report, and those have been happening right through the MDGs, and the same report happened in 2016 for the SDGs, and they're available on our website. We did the same in 2017. The difference being that we also delivered that report through a story map, and we started to take, I guess, in its coarsest level, we took data that was graphs and charts and a few pie diagrams more into data that had a relationship and location with countries and regions. And so we will be doing that more and more in the years to come. And in fact, we will continue to use that model and grow that model. And it's kind of like taking data that's along the lines of, you know, when you put out a global report and it'll talk about, for example, an indicator on poverty, or maybe an indicator on the environment. It's a little bit like, well, here's the difference. And you go, well, so what? But we don't really know where that changes. And I think this is where the big difference is we're starting to talk more about the where. And certainly when you look at global reporting or even regionally on poverty indices and other metrics, if you don't have a good understanding of, well, okay, where is that really critical, then you have no way of intervening or looking at what interventions may be structured and how they're best applied, particularly when you start looking at donors and funding and these sorts of things. And so the where brings more reality and cause to some of these equations. And so as a really simple example, when we did the 2017 report last year, which Lewis worked day and night on, was not so much what data was there country by country, but what data was not there country by country. And that was an enlightening moment in terms of, okay, these are our gaps as well. So there are areas where we needed to think about, okay, there's focus here. And so why is that data not being made available? What are the reasons? How do we sort of start contributing to some of those remedies? And those are the sorts of things that if you don't have that geospatial context or that relationship context, and not only, and one other thing I will finish with, and this is my little little bandwagon. Not only can you start looking at indicators country by country, but you can start looking at relationships between indicators, cause and effect between indicators. So if I look at an item around poverty, what does that mean, for example, in progress in education or health or birth rate? All those things have connectivity, and it's about how we build that interconnectedness on these indicators rather than treating them in isolation, because our interventions have dependencies against each of those different elements. And I think that's the power of the location and the analytics in the years coming in front of us.
Yeah, that intervention is really key in terms of comparability and identifying, across indicators with indicators and layering them to better understand where policy interventions can occur. I want to know if Lorraine would like to comment on that, as I know that she's deep in that space. So I want to give her an opportunity.
I think just to exactly add to both your comments there, even in some of the initial story maps that we created on the launch of the site, we were able to see patterns and information that, even the data custodians hadn't seen at the time. So I think it's that combining of different data sources to look at it for the, from an analytics point of view, as I've mentioned already, evidence-based decision making. I think that's really where we see the power of the data and having it available and matchable in ways. One of the other elements on our open data site is through the data layers themselves. So you can go in and view the data there, but we've also combined data sources. So there's a gallery of data that we've already kind of pre-cooked, and users can then, if they have their own AGOL account, can go in and further look at the evidence and the information. So I think we've really just looked at the tip of the iceberg ourselves, but I think that will be kind of a key differentiator here for us in comparison to many domain-specific sites that are already in existence. For the first time, we're seeing that the SDG Data Hub for Ireland provides that opportunity for data analysis, and with data sources that have full metadata that are adopting ISO or other appropriate standards throughout their life cycle and the metadata management. So I think it's the various pillars of this initiative combined will really drive the power of it and the benefit of it into the future.
Thanks, Lorraine. Excellent. I would urge everybody to go to Ireland's site, to the UNSD's website, and do some analysis. Use that data for your analysis. Explore it. Provide feedback. Share it with your communities. I want to thank everyone for being here. I do want to give a plug to Lorraine, and a thank you to Lorraine for her work and presentation here, and just plug her event at the High Level Political Forum that will be coming in July. That event will be very interesting, and we're looking forward to hearing the results of that from Ireland. I do also want to plug on behalf of UN Statistics Division in GIM, the World Geospatial Information Congress, which is coming up in November 2018. You can see more information about that on their website. And then lastly, of course, the Esri User Conference, which will be coming up July 9th to 12th. I urge everyone to come see us if you want to meet us in person at the Sustainable World Showcase, some of which the panel will be attending, but Adam, myself will be there and happy to ensue discussions and try to engage our community even more in this work. In closing, I want to urge everybody to check out our upcoming webinars as they move forward. We will be having others on this work as it progresses over time. And lastly, before we close, I'd like to urge everyone to take a minute, go through the survey for the webinar, and provide us some input on how we can improve this even more, make it more valuable to everybody. That input is greatly appreciated. With that, I will close out here by saying thank you on behalf of all the panelists. And I hope everyone gained some insight and plan on seeing all of you again. So with that, I will sign off. Thanks, everybody, and have an excellent morning, evening, wherever you are on this beautiful planet. Thank you.